Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's PR Council webinar, AI, Friend or Foe, Is Your Agency Ready? Today's conversation is brought to you by Sysmos and powered by OnStream Media. To submit a question or comment at any time during the webinar, you can find the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, type your message into the box, and click Submit. All questions will be answered at the end of today's presentation. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to David Berkowitz, Chief Strategy Officer at Sysmos. David, the floor is yours.
And so many great listeners and this really, really incredible panel who you're about to meet. So yeah, she mentioned with Sysmos, the social insights platform, and this is that as much as we'll talk about regarding that, I really want to get in and let's first just get a sense of who our panelists are, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll dive in for a lot of questions. If there are things you want to know, drop a note anytime. Might save questions for the end, but if there are some that relate to the flow of the conversation, by all means, we'll break things up and keep it really interactive. So, Allison, why don't you start with yourself, and we'll go down the row and hear what brings you here today.
Sure. Allison Hughley, I lead measurement and analytics at Weber Shandwick. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited for this conversation as we think about not only the implications for artificial intelligence and machine learning for measurement and analytics and doing that more efficiently, but also more broadly, what it means for the communications discipline. So really excited to be here. Thank you, David.
Hey, and I'm Scott Merland, SVP of Marketing Innovation here at Mbooth. So my role is sort of in two parts. One, to educate our internal staff and our clients, help them discover their future. But I think more meaningfully, actually apply the tools, techniques, and technologies that we're discovering that are evolving in the market to solve business challenges. So also excited to be here, and nice to meet you guys.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rowan Beneke. I am the chair of Burson Marstello's Global Technology Practice. Hi, can you hear me? Yes? No? You can hear me all right? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm the chair of the Global Tech Practice, and I'm delighted to be on this panel, some distinguished experts from across the industry here. I bring to the table two things. We help tech companies at Burson Marsteller tell their story as it relates to technologies and innovations that are being brought to market, such as AI or other more advanced technologies. What is the impact that those technologies are having on business and on consumer lifestyles? We also work with non-tech companies who are either being disrupted or by these technologies. Their industries are creating points of pain that they need to address with, or they are using technology to be seen as an innovator within their respective industries. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and your questions. Thank you for having us.
Great. So, and there are two areas that we're going to cover. There's the inside view, what's happening within your organization. There's the much broader one, the outside view, and what's happening with your clients and with their customers, and how they relate to it. Start on the inside view for a moment, and look at are your organizations using AI in any way? Are they interested in, or in organizations such as yours? You can go down the road.
Sorry, David.
Could you repeat the question?
Your head, or going your slide.
I'm sorry, David. Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Is your organization using AI?
Yes. So if you can hear me, at Weber, we are using AI both from an analytics perspective and also to make our analytics work more efficient, but also from content deployment and customer engagement. We've also been leveraging AI in those regards as well. Was that your question, David?
It is, since AI is so kind of it's such a heady topic, can you share any more about specifically what that means either for analytics or the content side, and what's different with AI versus what you were doing before?
Sure. So from an analytics perspective, I think there are tons of algorithms and libraries that have been developed that we're leveraging, as well as machine learning tech, whether it's IBM Watson, for example, to be able to analyze our content more efficiently, to be able to turn around and generate meaningful insights for our clients in ways that are much faster than if we were using traditional methods that employed humans. It's not much a departure from what's been in place. So we've had partners such as Sysomos where you've leveraged things like natural language processing, et cetera, to glean insights and to sort and parse content. The difference is that we as an agency are getting to do more of that work ourselves and beginning to look for opportunities to leverage the tech independent of some of our market partner platforms to be in a better position to customize the systems to better meet the insights needs of our clients. So with respect to how we're leveraging it, it's really from an efficiency perspective, but also from a customization to make sure that we're analyzing and training the technology to be able to deliver results, and insights that are more specific to our clients' intelligence needs versus a more general algorithm that perhaps was not as sufficiently nuanced for, say, a healthcare client or a client in the technology sector.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you.
So yes, we're interested in AI. We're using AI. I'd say, do we have all the answers? Absolutely not. I think that everyone is in the same boat in terms of this being a relatively new technology, especially in the communication space. I like to say that we're seeing AI come into the edges in terms of our business, certainly on the analytics and insights side of things. AI researcher Andrew Ning likes to say that AI right now is good at things that it takes a human about a second to process, right? So looking at a photo and telling you whether it's a cat or not. And I think we're trying to incorporate, what are the workflows, what are the contexts in our business that can use that level of AI effectively and efficiently. And that's hard. I think, when I think about AI and applications of AI, obviously the inputs are very important. If you're looking at what color of shirt is going to be big next year, what are the real inputs that you need to give a system for it to be able to say the color is green? And we certainly don't have the answers, and I'm not sure that anyone has the answers in terms of predicting at a sufficient level of credibility what an outcome like that is going to be yet. Now, I think the really interesting work is being done on the insights and analytics space in terms of deep learning, being able to analyze large sets of data and help to understand your audience and their attention, looking at your audience less as a giant demographic like a millennial, and thinking about sort of tribalism. We talk a lot about microtribes here at mBooth. And then I think the other really interesting application is the more experiential side, right? And this is, again, a fairly limited form of AI, but all the work that's being done with Amazon Alexa and Google Home and chatbots generally. And that's just using very basic capability like natural language processing to be able to interpret what someone is saying and hopefully deliver them something helpful in response. So a number of things that we're looking at. Is anything fully fleshed out? No. But I think that's the exploratory position that pretty much everyone in the industry and even beyond our industry are in at this point.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there to what my colleagues have said, Burst Marsteller, we are using AI. We have data scientists, and we create algorithms to query data sets, mostly for developing strategy. For instance, looking at behavioral analytics to determine what an audience is likely to do. So what people will say on a poll or a survey is not always the same thing of what they're actually doing when they're online. And so, using machine learning to look at pattern analysis on why people do certain things, why do they go to certain places after having gone to certain places, and to be able to inform strategy. But my hesitation in all of this is, while we are using it on the analytics side to develop media targeting, develop communication strategies for the most part, we're experimenting, and I don't think I think we've only just touched the surface. But the bigger question is, are we using AI? What is AI? And I think it's such a term that's fraught with lots of different meanings to different people. And so, we are using parts of what people will describe as AI, but we don't have robots yet, and don't foresee any time in the future that that we're going to be overtaken by AI. But I think this is a part of the challenge that we all have as communicators and marketers, is to be very specific about what we mean by AI. Otherwise, there's a danger that it becomes a nothingness term, and we can get AI washing, and that's going to be as big a reputation issue to deal with if it turns out that it's not authentic, as opposed to something that you might be doing that's interesting and clever.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you referenced robots, because we actually did a survey at Weber last year specific to AI and consumer perceptions, and it is something that's very along the lines of a Blade Runner-esque perception of what artificial intelligence is. There's actually a really good book that came out earlier this year, Life 3.0. I think the author is Max Tegmark, and he paints a very interesting picture about the potential for artificial intelligence and how potentially we as humans have been locked into our view of AI as being either to a robot or a piece of hardware. And the future picture that he illustrates very well in the book is fascinating in terms of how true artificial intelligence will break beyond the barriers of any physical space or entity, and will be developing content at lightning speed and being incredibly creative. So I think it's interesting that the robot reference, I think collectively we've sort of had a lot of discussion, or much of it so far, to sort of the idea of analytics and algorithms and leveraging data, sort of as we've traditionally thought about something that is quantified. I think where it gets really interesting is when you look at artificial intelligence as a creative mechanism. And I think we've sort of tried to hold that as humans as a protected space, that artificial intelligence moving into the creative space. And I think that is really where potentially the opportunity, but as much as the threat for us as communicators, when we see the advances in artificial intelligence in terms of generate content, and actually successful content. It's fairly nascent now, but I think when we think holistically about the communications industry, I think that is where the impact is going to happen. We found in our survey as well that about 55% of CMOs felt that artificial intelligence was going to have more impact on business than social media. And I think that impact is not only going to come from the analytics and the insights, it's going to come from the power of artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, to actually generate really compelling content. I think there's huge opportunity there, but tremendous risk as well, from an employment standpoint, but also from a human discovery standpoint, as we reinforce, machines will reinforce who we are today versus being exposed to new things and allowing us to break beyond that. But that's a total philosophical debate. So.
Yeah, if I can jump in there, I think it's interesting around the creative aspect of AI, because I think a lot of the surveys and a lot of the data that we see out of the marketplace talks about certain activities that will be replaced by AI, that those activities are generally sort of lower down in the totem pole of things that are rote and repetitive and sort of very structured. So if we think about a communications role, you tend to look downstream in terms of what will be automated, but we do see outside of the PR industry, if you look at the advertising industry, McCann in Japan a couple of years ago hired a creative director, an AI as a creative director, specifically to look at what are the mechanisms that what are the ingredients that create award-winning work at the Cannes Lions, for example, and using that data set to then query how particular clients can respond with creating an award-winning piece of work. And so there's an example of a very human, very creative role that's not too far from our own worlds, where it's at the top end that's being disrupted first, because it enables us to be better humans, and to be better spent on the things that we can do that's strategic and creative and more personal.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. I mean, I'd say that the AI has yet to win an award at Cannes, but when it does, maybe I'll be a little scared as a former creative director myself. But I think that it's all about the tool, right? It's like when Photoshop, when the Adobe Creative Suite came into the creative department, how that allowed creatives to express their creativity in new ways that were previously impossible. And I think AI, in terms of the creative content space, will be a lot like that. It will help inform what we should put on a page, but it won't be sort of a set it and forget it, go win us some awards this year kind of mechanism. It's an interesting question, because I think, in terms of talking about what is AI, it's hard to both at once convince someone how AI is changing everything, and it's doing so very quickly, like 3-year time span, and you need to think about that as a business with some immediacy, but also that the robots aren't coming for your children, and then we're not all going to be replaced by sentient algorithms in the cloud in a few years. So there is that real impact that's happening, right? That a lot of people don't even see. Every time you swipe your credit card, AI is making sure that transaction is actually you, right? When you get auto insurance, when you use Facebook, when you search on Google, all of these things are using really sophisticated, powerful AI. But we're nowhere close to the point where it's a human level intelligence, human level creative abilities, curatorial abilities, all of those things. I think that if you talk to an AI scientist today, they would not even really be able to put together or connect the dots that get us there, at least at our current stage.
True, but I don't think the timeline for that is going to be as long as we think, in terms of AI, artificial intelligence, being able to generate compelling creative. I think we try to hold that as humans as a sacred space, because we feel that it's what makes us different. But I think if you look at the ability of artificial intelligence to ingest massive amounts of content, far beyond, for example, what could be available just from an analysis of all of the entries at Cannes, but really all of the content that's been developed and is selling, I think the timeline will be shorter. That's my assumption, and I think that we're going to hold on to our human distinction as long as we can. But if you look at MIT has been doing over the past 2 years, so last year I think they did, their focus was on creating sort of very scary images by having their AI sort of analyze creative visual content. This year, they started actually shifting towards writing books. So they had an artificial intelligence called Shelley, very interestingly named after Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, is, I think, the connection. But the idea being that they admit that it's not quite there yet, and there's a great article, I think it was either in Time or 4chan, about, if you look at a famous author like Stephen King and how long it would take him to write his kind of opening paragraph that hooks people, that machine learning or that artificial intelligence is generating massive amounts of content of varying degrees of quality. But what it allows it to do is test and learn very efficiently. What makes artificial intelligence work is that it's a probabilistic modeling. So it's basically trying to reduce the error. So if the outcome is engagement, if the outcome is book sales, it's the same philosophy that Amazon uses in putting forth their content. It is just going to get smarter faster than we will, because it's going to have not only the ability to generate more content, but to analyze the outcomes of that content more quickly than we ever will. So again, I think that timeline is going to be truncated significantly, and play against our assumptions of how long it will take machines to get as smart as we are. But
Yeah, I think
that's just
Yeah,
it.
I was going to say the timeline
sorry.
of where we are is, what is AI, and how does it work? I think that's, largely where the narrative is now, and I think it's
Right.
not going to be too far. In fact, I think we're almost there in terms of why I should care, and depending on the application of AI, if it's about or an autonomous vehicle, you're going to care an awful lot if you're going to trust your life. And put your kids in a car. And so the reason the conversation quickly shifts from, why is AI safer, or saves more lives, or reduces, errors. In the case of driving, human error is the number one cause of fatality. So I think the why AI is something of an opportunity for all brands and all companies as I think about, spurring adoption.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I often it's maybe overly simplistic, but I liken it to the internet, right? We're in 1996 of the dawn of the internet, and we're sort of sitting down asking the question, what does the internet mean to your business? And it's not going to be I just add AI and now I'm good, right? It's actually going to be transform every piece of this, right? People still wonder. I think today they're trying to implement the internet in their business, right? And you can't just set up a website and expect to be Amazon, right? Everything about Amazon was created to be on the internet and to optimize around that. And I think we're going to see much the same thing with AI.
I think from a communication standpoint, though, there's also tremendous opportunity, but we should be also talking about the risks as communications agencies. I think the idea that our artificial intelligence, as it's designed, is based on a core set of inputs, and I think that we are reaching a point, and I think if we look at how news is consumed, et cetera, or how recommendations are made, that fact that the recommendations are based on our historic behaviors is highly problematic and risky if we think about reinforcing potentially bad behaviors, reinforcing mindsets and philosophies that are narrow in view and not having enough opportunity to infuse new thinking. So I do think that there's tremendous opportunity. It's more efficient. But I do think from a communication standpoint, there's a lot of risk that I don't think we've really internalized. I think a lot has come to light over the past year with respect to fake news. There have been several articles talking about the inherent bias in terms of the demographic skews in the populations that are developing the core algorithms and deciding what data goes into developing the algorithms that are supporting the machine learning and artificial intelligence that we're increasingly, without a lot of thought, relying on. And so I think we do have to think about the communications risk, I think, as much from a crisis perspective for our clients, but also just as consumers of information and intelligence. It has the potential to create a reinforcing feed loop that could be very compromising to the health of society and to the health of just sort of general intellectual kind of inquiry and curiosity. When you allow your content and everything to be served and to be decided by a machine, and increasingly with black box solutions, especially as you get into deep learning, where you don't even actually fully understand what the computer has developed. So as the gap between our understanding of the machines that we have initially trained increases, I do think there will be more risk built into that system in terms of our ability to both control and to fully understand the control over our decisions as they will be served to us by machines.
So true.
Yeah, so Rowan, I did want to go and just bring up the post you wrote on LinkedIn a year and a half ago now, and you talked about the age of robo PR, and you in particular, you seem to welcome the idea of AI taking over some of the more some aspects of the job that might seem kind of mundane, but still fall under that great realm, like writing press releases, like doing outreach to journalists. And I'm curious, a year and a half later, what your mindset is on what you actually wrote there.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm bullish in terms of anything that can help you, a tool basically, any tool that can help you do your job better and help you be smarter and more effective at what you do. I think generally, I would view that as a positive, and so I would have the same starting point. I think what has changed, and from what I had written 18 months ago, is we're increasingly seeing AI being adopted in the workforce in specific use cases or in specific industries. There was a survey put out earlier this summer that says that as a manager in any kind of business, 54% of the activities that a manager does are very administrative oriented. And so that only leaves in the same survey something like 10% of your time that's dedicated to strategy and innovation, and even less time that's dedicated to nurturing talent and working with internal stakeholders. And so just in that one, that one aspect is, if there's something that can help you be more focused on your core business, such as developing strategy or working, with team members or clients, then I think that's a good thing. That's on the positive. On the negative, if we see things like a creative director being disrupted by AI, that does beg the question, ethically or philosophically or just practically, what does that mean if my boss is an AI? How do I negotiate a new salary or time off, or how do you? A silly example, but that's increasingly going to be a reality. I think perhaps not immediately, but in the near future, where the typical social construct of how we might about our employer. If our employer is increasingly going to be automated, what does that mean for the value of our jobs? I'll leave that to some of my panel of folks to respond to.
Well, I think we already see some of the implications there. If we look at sort of AI being leveraged in even something like the hiring process, this goes back to my earlier point. It will heavily depend on who trained your system. Yep. That experience that you have will be based on sort of to what extent can you convey your corporate culture and the mindset of the organization or spirit of the organization, a very human view, into how that decision process we made. I think one of the points that comes up in the book, Life 3.0, is this idea that, as technology marches forward, historically it's been humans that have marched forward. And so when we're building, a new skyscraper, do we actually care about the anthill that we crush? That is potentially the dynamics between an artificial intelligence caring about or having the capacity or even interest in processing what would be in their mind, potentially anthill human needs. So I think we do have to be careful around how and not to be completely negative or dystopic in my view of artificial intelligence, but I think we need to rethink and not try to view the potential for artificial intelligence through a human lens, because the view of the world that the artificial intelligence will eventually evolve into will be very different. I think will be very different from our own, and we can't tether things like human emotion, for example. It can replicate it from an algorithm standpoint in terms of what will drive and evoke our emotions, but actually expecting that the intelligence will have compassion. To your point around having a discussion with your manager about a specific need, I think that will be curious to see, and I think that if it ever gets there, will be later. So I think we have to be careful about ascribing human lenses to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's a great point, and my head kind of explodes if I try to go there too deep. I don't want to work for a robot. I think that, as Allison said, like if you give AI biased input, you get biased output. And that has the potential to create all sorts of problems. And frankly, I'm more worried about that in sort of the macro scale of, the politics. The 2016 election was brought up. I mean, just the Twitter is 50% chatbots. Is a little scary, right? And they don't have to be that smart to be incredibly disruptive. in terms of repeating fake news and things like this. But I think the more profound change, I think the thing that keeps me awake at night is really thinking about where our business is going to be in 5 years, right? And I think it's going to be a lot different. You know, again, back to the internet, everything changed, right? In the last 20 years since really that became a major phenomenon. And I think the same will hold true for AI. And I think the application is really that you know, right now we're talking about sort of what has already been baked, right, by our clients. Here's a new product, here's a new service. Go talk about this, right? Talk to our customers. But I think, you know, in the future, in the not too distant future, it'll be professionally irresponsible if we're doing a campaign, we're communicating a message that hasn't been thoroughly tested, right? Where we haven't run thousands of experiments to test that message with the public, so that we can definitively tell you with, you know, 90% confidence that message is going to resonate, right? And I think that type of insight is going to lead us to swim upstream, and we're going to be influencing those products and services, right? People in the communications business.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's tech, you know, in development that actually, in terms of the need to develop, you know, hundreds of tests on a new message versus having sort of a very robust sense of what resonates, because you've kind of mined everything. So we've actually had some exposure through a relationship with Columbia Data Science Institute, where they have faculty that's developing tech to support creatives. So the idea is you can plug in sort of what is your thoughts on a message or something that will resonate, and it actually will run it through an existing engine that has analyzed, you know, petabytes of data, et cetera, and we'll come back with actually a list of recommendations in terms of saying, like, this is a solid message, but when we look at how this topic is being discussed and the audiences that you want to target, we can actually come back with suggestions and recommendations for how you can enhance and refine. So I think even the idea, to your point, of how our thinking begins to evolve with artificial intelligence, it's we think of creating and then testing. I think so much is going to be the market in and of itself is just an ongoing test, and what we'll be doing is leveraging artificial intelligence to surface the insights that will lead us in the right direction. Exactly. Yeah.
Out of a point of view there, I mean, the more we embed AI and automation technologies into the work that we do, it seems that the more and more you know, robotic we become, in that, you know, we rely on a lot more facts and figures and statistics to rationalize why it's a good thing or why it's a bad thing or how it's working or if it's having impact. I think the opportunity for communicators, yes, we should have the rational response and test those messages and have all the evidence to communicate a point of view. But I think equally important, you know, is the emotional considerations that go into making the decision to bring it into the workforce, or whether or not that's a good thing for us to have. And so I think the message and the tone and the stakeholders will also change. So, you know, it's about how do you, if you're going to drive consumer adoption of these technologies, you need to be able to speak in a way that's going to not only influence them, you know, to do something, but also have the confidence to change those behaviors. And so I think the emotional intelligence about how we communicate AI is a big opportunity for all of us, because the stakeholders are, you know, not just going to be technologists who are interested in the facts and the hows, but it's going to be other stakeholders, whether they be politicians or advocacy groups, you know, where we have to address the fear and the anxiety about what this all means, or on the more positive on the trust, and how do we get people to really you know, fall in love with something and not be afraid. I think that's a real challenge for us when we're talking about this.
I think that will increasingly shift as technology evolves, that allows us to capture, to your point, some of those emotional signals better. So sorry, as an analyst, I think, you know, emotions are chemical reactions which can be tracked through biometric signals. I think as we get more sensor technology, as we look at things like our, you know, if we look at the tech within our phones, increasingly the idea that we'll access our phone through facial recognition, that same facial recognition could be leveraged to capture in real time responses to content as you're scrolling through and driving that to actual emotions. So I do think we will get the technology, the ability of the technology or the artificial intelligence to make critical connections between driving those emotional outcomes so that it is not as cold, or it will still be based in data, but it will not be, I think, the quantified data or the responses or behaviors that we track. But to your point, the emotional piece, I think that will become more a part of the conversation as the tech evolves. We have had conversations with partners as we're trying to figure out how do you get biometrics out of the lab. Soon we'll all be wearing it, but I think the idea of being able to have something that you can carry with you into the experience, track that, and begin to create a database of those emotional responses, I think will add more nuance to the ability of these engines to actually create or help us create in the near term content that's going to have the appropriate emotional resonance to understand what's triggering a fear response or joy or whatever would get us to really feeling that we have elicited that reaction. I completely agree with you that cognitive responses or driving those is not what will help us be successful going forward. It really is about an emotional connection, and I think sensors and biometrics will allow these systems and engines to function beyond the behaviors, and that will only make the technology more robust and potentially more impactful.
Just one response is in something like cars. I mentioned that cars can drive themselves, right? Technically, we're here. That's already happened, but doesn't mean to say I'm happy about not having a driver in my car when I get into an Uber, or if I'm riding along the highway with an 18-wheeler next to me that has no human in it. So I think it's how you accept these technologies and how that acceptance manifests into laws that are created or the ethical decisions that are programmed into some of these products. That's, I think, a part of what I'm talking about is, there's a broader canvas now that we can paint with when it comes to the impact of AI and why we should care about it. We have to address both rational and emotional to have a complete story that's going to compel people to feel one way or the other, in addition to how they should think about it.
So I want to go and make sure we get some questions from viewers, and we've got a really good one that came in. So thank you, Matt, for asking this. Can you walk through an example of how we'd approach a client brief 5 years from now, based on how AI will alter our business and allow us to better target audiences and uncover insights?
So I'll jump in. So I think this is something I think about a lot, and I'd say like I was beginning to say before, I think we're going to really swim upstream in terms of being part of the innovation that's actually happening within our client's business, right? That says we're going to, we have a new idea for a new product, and it's water with caffeine in it, and we think this is going to be a success and get us $1 billion and all this stuff. I think we're going to begin to be included in those conversations before a product is even realized or even tested in market, right? And we're actually going to be able to play out scenarios for them, effectively predict the result of that launch, and also experiment with communications, with creative, with how you tell the story of that product, to actually be able to run experiments that go out 10 years over the life cycle of that product. And then all of those experiments will in turn inform whether that product even sees the light of day. But hopefully it improves that product before it actually goes to manufacturing or whatever, or even makes it into the hands of a consumer. And I think that's a really powerful idea, and really positions communications companies as more sort of innovation consultants. And that's my take.
I'd respond to that. I think if we look at a lot of times what communications campaigns come down to is what content are we going to create, and how is that content going to be distributed to the audiences through which channels. I think that part of the equation is largely 5 years, maybe that's too soon, I'm not sure, but I think that type of discussions with clients and the specifics of where clients are going to involve that sort of detail in the brief is going to change. I think that component of content creation, content distribution, and how you target various audiences based on analytics and other data, that's an area that's right to be changed, which allows us to have different kind of conversations. So, we see in the news, in the publishing realm, annual reports, sports scores, headlines by Tronc. There's a lot of content that's already being automated in the way that it's created and distributed. I think that lends itself for a much more interesting conversation for consultants and clients to talk about the strategies as to or the creative aspects of campaigns as opposed to the execution and tactical aspects of campaigns. That would be maybe our take.
I think that from our perspective, we view this very much as like preparing for the future client brief in the now. And so I think that we understand that many of our clients, as they're in the process of transitioning traditional methods, so let's say core community management, to leveraging bots, for example, we actually are doing the side-by-side piloting to say these are the core metrics or success metrics as managed traditionally. And when you infuse AI into the process, these are the levels of efficiency, deeper levels of engagement, faster response times that you get by incorporating machine learning tech into the process. So the idea of using this in the now period, as the technology is more nascent, to over the next few years build out those cases that illustrate when you migrate from A to B and operating differently, leveraging artificial intelligence, you actually will see this level of improvement in how we execute and how we operate on behalf of you. So we view it very much as part of stewardship. So we're taking advantage of this pilot phase where it's more nascent, people are open to experimentation, build the corpus of proof points around how it works and how it works differently, so that 5 years from now, when we're in a briefing situation and we're trying to tell our clients, what is the advantage or benefit of taking the risk on incorporating artificial intelligence, we are beginning now to amass the proof points that we're going to need 5 years from now on how it impacts how we operate on their behalf and ultimately how it improves their engagements with their stakeholders.
Yeah, and I just add, I think that it'll be more risky in 5 years to not use the AI-powered tool than to use it.
Right. So that definitely speaks to the idea of even internally as organizations that are adopting sort of artificial intelligence as a new discipline, we also have use this pilot period for our own kind of test and learn so that we're not still experimenting 5 years from now with what is increasingly core today, and are able to leverage those learnings as the technology and the opportunities become more sophisticated.
Right.
That was a great question.
So getting into how companies are marketing themselves. This is a lot of fun. It seems like more and more every company needs to have .ai domain names and just going in for AI stories.
I have some for sale for you if you want one.
To do with Oh, excellent. Well, great. We can go and you can start taking bids in the Q&A here. So yeah. How long of an arc do you think? How long do you think you have to sell those things? Is everyone just going to be doing this for a long time? Is this trend fad? What is this?
I'm sorry. What is AI as a trend? I'm sorry. Could you clarify the question, David? I'm sorry.
In terms of companies marketing themselves by attaching AI and .ai domain names and just putting AI all over the site, as far as this is now how companies are positioning themselves, selling themselves, and for startups trying to get funding, and even for other companies, just like a financial services firm that wants to look more innovative. They say, it's AI-powered transactions now. It's not just transactions.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be, that's branding big data or data science or any host of terms that have been tossed around over the past few years. I think, unfortunately, there will be some kind of weeding out of those that really don't have the depth that they profess in the website. That will come in the work. And I think the marketplace in and of itself will get increasingly sophisticated to be able to see past those terms and kind of branding and really look for the strategic application of the technology. So I think if that is a trend that you're seeing, I think it will probably be increasingly short-lived as the marketplace becomes more knowledgeable about what artificial intelligence is and the true potential. There'll be the same level of scrutiny, to the point that was raised earlier by Scott in terms of this is like the internet. Everyone could pop up a site, but there were varying degrees of good and varying degrees of sophistication, and there was a weeding out. We were the same thing, as it's just a natural part of the evolution as new technology comes online.
Right, it's exactly where we are in the hype cycle right now. But look, AI was first, I think the term was invented in the 1950s, right? So for AI researchers, for the 10,000 people that really know what they're talking about in this space, they've been working on this for 40 years, right? And sort of marketers swept in, everyone else swept in like 2015 to say, oh, this is really interesting space. I think I can apply this to my business. I think I can make some money. I think I can sell it to someone else. It's going to take a very careful, finely tuned lens to be able to look at the solution out there, because everything is going to be .ai something. You probably can't sell a piece of technology without saying that you have AI at least on your roadmap. That's why people like us have jobs, and I think I try to go a few levels deeper than the domain name when we evaluate solutions. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? It's like, I'd like to try a lot of things. I'll take a risk in terms of running an experiment or just asking what if and try a new tool. Even if it does seem, sort of a little bit up in the wishful thinking realm, just to see if it works, right? And I think we just have to be playful and experimental, and that will help separate the cream.
Right. I think the other reality, though, David, to your question, is that what has happened since, to Scott's point, it's been around for a long time for those who are really in the know, is that there's been a lot of work in more recent years that makes that technology more accessible to people that perhaps don't have that level of depth, who are that next tier down, or maybe several tiers down from the 10,000. So if you look at something basic like Python and machine learning algorithms to do more advanced analytics, that was inaccessible to someone who did not have a certain degree of coding depth for quite some time. But now you have libraries that have been developed that sort of shortcut the need for that coding depth. So there are things that are happening from the other side that are actual evolutions in how artificial intelligence is being packaged and made more accessible to more people. I also think that the way that it's potentially being skinned, it's the same way that when we started with the internet or with computers, you had to know the raw basic coding language in order to be successful. Now it eventually evolved into point and click, and then everyone could have access to it and leverage it. That's along the lines of where we're moving. I think from a commercial solution standpoint and people branding themselves as artificial intelligence, I think one of the critical questions for anyone who's coming to you and saying they're deep in AI, it's, are the algorithms yours? Or like, did you create them? Are they proprietary? Or are you actually leveraging something that was from, a publicly available library? So teasing out the levels of sophistication, or how much of that is really kind of custom made and unique to your organization and your value proposition, and how much of it is potentially a repackaging and repurposing of existing tech or libraries. Not to say that it's right or wrong either way, but if you're really trying to vet the sophistication of a partner, you want to look for that team of data scientists and engineers that are actual builders and creators of that tech, not perhaps recyclers of that tech. And I think that's, a way that you can think about it. It's not wrong. We use available solutions all the time. But if you're trying to tease out just a branding play, there are some ways that you can ask some pointed questions to get at real levels of depth in this space.
I think branding AI as a fundamental is fundamentally wrong. It's a missed opportunity because, as we've just described here, AI is so is such a catch-all phrase, and if you're going to be leaning on AI as your brand or as your marketing tactic, it's such a general term that it means nothing, and it's going to require you to spend additional money and additional resources to be able to define what do you exactly mean by AI. And so I think as a general point, to what Alison was saying, it's useful to be able to indicate sort of category or a space that you're playing in, but it doesn't help with being specific about what your company or your product or your brand is about, because AI in itself requires definition. And so I think there's a better opportunity for brands to associate themselves with the specifics of what they're doing, whether it's in machine learning, or within neural networks, or any other aspect of AI that is going to be more specific and has less chance to be called out as being BS.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that's a really good point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
It's okay. I'll just add that, at the end, what you were saying, Allison, about sort of is a given startup's AI real, and often it's Google, right? Google is sort of the solution behind the solution. But that's, okay in my opinion. I think, especially when people are honest about that, I appreciate it. Because the AI, AlphaGo, DeepMind that, Google has created does a lot of different things. And I think it's okay if you want to use Google's whatever cat classifier in your application, because that's going to help you get to a product or service faster, right? And it's not the tool that is the innovation; it's how you use it.
Completely agree. I do like Ronan's point, though, on kind of the BS piece of this. I do think that we're in a phase with that level of branding, though, where there's not a lot of depth and understanding in exactly what artificial intelligence is, or even the application. So I do think as an industry, which has been known for not necessarily being as quantitative or as savvy in the data spaces, we're definitely getting there. But I think there's a lot of risk for adoption and selling in of solutions that are, in fact, not as good as they profess to be because someone has tacked on that branding. So I do think, it behooves everyone who's in a decision-making space to be a bit more well-versed in what this technology is and what those solutions can and cannot do, and coming up the same way that, when social media, social listening platforms came out, just to continue to date ourselves, there was a lot of work that was done on kind of what are those vetting mechanisms and how do you identify, for example, David, like Sysmos, how do we know that this is the partner that is going to meet our needs and having a criteria? I think all of us as, within organizations need to not only be experimenting with the tech, but also developing some level of criteria for how we go about vetting partners in this space, especially with that level of kind of branding for marketing purposes, but not necessarily always coming with a high degree of technical.
Right. The danger is that it's seen like magic, and it's not magic.
Yes, exactly.
And since you have that great plug, I also then want to just make sure we have time for one last question now, and this will be a lightning round, so 30 to 60 seconds. I want to make sure to get this in, and I'll give it to Erica Fields, who chimed in the Q&A. A quick take. What should a PR professional do today to prepare themselves for the transition to AI?
I'm huge on just learning and training. So there are a host of the internet where you can go to kind of educate yourselves about what AI is. I think the same way that there had to be a mass education around digital, not from a we use it as part of our daily lives, but how does it fit into strategy and strategic communications? That evolution needed to happen across agency. I think the sooner, and again, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think the sooner practitioners begin to familiarize themselves with what artificial intelligence is, the terminology, the vernacular, I think it will diminish the likelihood of being seduced by, creatively branded solutions. But I also think it sets the stage for how to be ready for what this means and the implications for executing from a strategic communication standpoint. So any host of online universities and Coursera's have just introductory courses. I think even a partner of Weber's, which is Columbia Data Science Institute, has a track that focuses on data science and then the intersections with machine learning. It's part of an edX series. It's no cost. I think it's about the curiosity and beginning that discovery process now versus trying to retrofit later. The space is moving so quickly, it'll be too late.
I'd say talk to a human who's involved in AI in some aspect. have the personal experience will certainly help in addition to learning and coaching. But I think shadowing somebody or finding someone in your network who's associated with related technologies and asked to have a coffee or a lunch or to shadow them for an afternoon. I think as much as we can have personal direct experiences with people who are actually on the coalface doing something that's related to this field will be a much more memorable and significant experience as a place to start.
Yeah. We actually,
Yeah,
to that point, thank you for referencing that. We actually had someone come in from Columbia, Hod Lipson, who leads a part of their robotics and artificial intelligence, come in and give a presentation to the agency. So I think you're absolutely right, Ronan, that the idea of having a human voice and face to this is important. Sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I guess I'll just echo all of that. I mean, definitely talk to a human, watch lots of webinars. The idea that you can just go to college and then be set up for life and your 40-year career is that maybe never happened, but it certainly is not happening today. And you just have to approach your career as an always-on learning opportunity, right? And certainly AI, you have to think about it like this is the new internet or the new electricity. Like it is that big, right? And it's so important that people go out there and seek information out, seek knowledge out. There's so many great resources on the internet, podcasts, dozens of really great podcasts you can listen to. But just be curious. And I think, just like computer programming, some people don't approach it because it seems complicated and all of this. And you just have to be a bit fearless and just sort of leap and maybe not look so much. So there's no risk in getting your head in there and sort of having a look around.
Great.
Great, thanks everyone. Katie, any closing? Katie, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I thank you all so much for joining today's webinar. I hope you found it valuable. Thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing their insights with us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.